What's up, everybody? All right, so today on In Good Hands, we're talking about anger. Um, and we're talking about what God has to say about anger and what God has to say about hatred and not only hatred, but also, you know, how having these emotions and having these feelings, um, how to go about them and sort of what Jesus sort of teaches about it and what God sort of says about it. But yeah, so I'm gonna start off by saying, by talking about sort of Ephesians 4, 25 to 31, um, and so or 25 through 31, and so when looking at this text, um, I originally highlighted it for controlling the tongue, and I was like, wait a minute, hold on, we gotta talk about something. But and then I went back over it probably 2 weeks ago, and I said, you know what? Let's talk about this in terms of anger because that's what it mainly talks about in verses 26 and 31, and that's what it mainly just talks about in 26 to 30, 27. So yeah, so 26 says, uh, "Don't sin by letting anger control you." And then 27 says, "Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil." And essentially, it's just straight up, plainly saying, don't let anger control your actions and and your feelings, and don't let anger overcloud your judgment and what is going on with God is trying to do in your heart. And I think so many of us let our emotions control us. And that's what society says. Society says, you know, listen to your emotions. Society says, listen to, what your inner thoughts are. Listen to what your emotions are telling you. Listen to what you want to do. And ultimately, that's not what God says to do. He says, don't let your emotions control you. And in this particular case, he's talking about how sin and anger almost directly correlate, and how if you are guided by anger, then what ends up happening is you're most likely going to fall into temptation, into sin that ultimately leads you to being lost and being confused and being frustrated all the time and having a negative output on life. And like it's going to lead you to having this mindset of negativity and this mindset of anger and this mindset of frustration. And ultimately, it's just going to lead you to continuously sitting without even realizing it. And so, anger, it God mainly says, be sober. And I think so many people, when God says, be sober, or be sober minded, he's not just talking about substances. He's not just talking about drugs. He's not just talking about alcohol. He's not just talking about, being flooded with everything going on. He's saying be sober minded when your emotions are involved. That means when you're angry, don't let anger control you. Be sober minded. When you're sad, don't let sadness control you. Be sober minded. When you're excited, don't let anger control you. Be sober minded. Right? He's saying you can have these emotions. These emotions are for I created you to have these emotions. I created you to have emotions going on, whether it's sadness, joy, anger, whether it's frustration, whether it's so many different things. He's not saying don't have the emotions. He's saying don't let it control you, right? Um, one I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I was talking to him, and we were chatting about actually we were talking about anger, and the conversation ended up going to, can you remember a time, whether you were when you were younger or recent times, when all of a sudden you became so flooded with anger, so flooded with frustration, so flooded with just pure rage that you essentially blacked out and you started doing actions that you had no idea you wanted to do. You had no idea you were doing. You had no idea that any of it was going on, and you were doing all these things. You were saying all these things, and then afterwards, after you were angry, you were like, you were reflecting on it, and you were thinking about it, and you were saying, "Did I really say those things? Did I really say and do those things?" Um, that's essentially what God is talking about. He's basically saying like, "Hey, by the way, what's going to end up happening is you're not going to be sober minded when you realize like even your emotions can be tricking you. Even your heart. It even says, I don't remember where it says it, but it even says like don't listen to your heart. Your heart can easily deceive you." And God even says that. He mentions that. He's like, "Don't listen to your emotions. Your emotions aren't gonna help you." Um, but yeah, and so Paul here in Ephesians is basically just hitting it on the nail, where he's basically saying like, don't let anger guide you. Otherwise, the devil has a foothold on you. But yeah, um, yeah, absolutely. And then if we flip over to, we're gonna work our way backwards. If we flip over to Romans 1:18 through 30, 18 through 32. If I can get there, maybe. It's literally a whole passage talking about anger. And it's literally a whole passage about how God hates sin, and what he does with that anger towards sin. And so in this, there's just sort of, um, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing because it's really freaking long. Also, because I want you guys to look through it and make some observations and sort of see what's going on here during anger and what's Paul talking about through this anger. Um, and yeah, so verse 18 says, hold on, let me find it again. Okay, it says, "But God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful wicked people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. They know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his internal power, and his divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God." And it purely just like this whole section where it's 18 to 20, it's literally just simply talking about like God hates sin, and he judges those that love sin and that envelop their life in the sin, and he exhibits his anger through the judgment. And so I think a lot of people don't recognize that, like, because of the judgment, which is Hebrews 9:27, which is, I'm going to give you some time to think about it before I say it. For judgment, which is Hebrews 29, which says, "Just as we are all destined to die once, and after that to face judgment," what ends up happening is the judgment is God's anger towards the sin, right? And so he's saying, like, he's 100% just. God is a just God, all right? Jesus is very just. God is very, very, very just. There's nothing denying it. There's nothing debating it. There's nothing saying anything against it. God is just. And he's saying through Paul in this chapter, in chapter 1, verse 18 through 20, he's simply saying, hey, this is why I'm just, right? He's giving the reason why he hates sin, and then he's giving the reason why he judges people, right? And so he's straight up saying everyone that gets judged has every opportunity to notice the amazing miracles and wonders that I have to offer. That's what he's saying. He literally just said it. And so many people don't recognize uh, that he's a just God because he does have anger towards judgment. And so it just goes to say, like, there is a such thing as holy anger. Like, God gets angry. Jesus got angry. I can prove it. Literally, there's an excerpt in John. It's um, John chapter 2. Is it John chapter 2? Yeah, it's John chapter 2, and he's coming in, and he sort of, wait, John chapter 2. Yeah, it's John chapter 2. It says, it was almost a Jewish Passover season. Okay. And then verse 16. It's John chapter 2, verse 16. It says, then going over to the people who sold doves, he told them, get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace. And then the disciples remembered the prophecy from scriptures, which said, passion for God's house will consume me. But the Jewish leaders demanded, what are you doing? If God gave you the authority to do it, show us a miraculous sign to do it, to prove it. And then Jesus says, all right, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Which he's talking about he's talking about his own death, and he's talking about how he raises from the dead 3 days later. And the Jewish leaders are saying, you can't possibly do that, blah, 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 blah. But and I gotta get there. Maybe. All right, page or not paging. My book is still broken. Like it's literally tearing at the seams. Look. You can't really see it, but it's literally tearing at the seams. I gotta glue it, but it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's not fine. But God forgive me. No, it's fine. Shoot, where is this? All right. All right, now I can't find it. All right, for some reason I'm not finding it right now. But basically he's at the temple and he clears the temple, and he's essentially coming in and he's basically turning to people and he's going, all right, I'm mad at this. Like I'm disgusted. I hate this, and I have such a passion for my Father's house that all of a sudden he makes this giant whip, and he starts whipping around the place, and he throws the tables, and he chucks the tables, and he absolutely destroys the temple. Not really. He doesn't destroy the temple itself. He destroys the marketplace within the temple. But he goes around and he's flipping all these tables and he's breaking all these things and he's whipping the whip and he's literally making people just run for their lives outside of the temple. And he's saying, get out. Like, you guys don't deserve to be here. This is a temple. This is the temple of the Lord. You guys don't deserve to be here right now. And so he's going through this and he's talking about this temple and he's talking about everything going on, and he's basically using his anger, which he justified by saying, this is my Father's holy temple. Why are you selling random stuff in my Father's? It's not random. It's doves and it's cattle and it's a few other things. But he's basically saying, like, this is a holy temple. This is not supposed to be a spot for merchants to be. And this is not supposed to be a location where you guys are selling trades and you guys are selling goods. This is not that place. And so he's using his anger and he's breaking everything. But the premise of the whole story is Jesus is doing this because he knows that it's wrong for them to be here. And he's not hurting anyone in the process. And I think some Christians are really good at saying they're justified at doing something because of this to because of that story, which I say to that, and which I say to that, I'm like, that's not justifying it at all. Um, Jesus did it because he was fighting for his father's temple and saying, "This is disgraceful. You're embarrassing my father. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourselves, and you're letting it come by." And he's making a point. He's not just destroying it just to destroy it, just to make a point for himself. He's making the point for everyone to see. He's saying, you guys are not doing something right here. And you know you're not doing it right. You know it's a sin to be here and do this here. And yet you're still choosing to pursue it. You're still choosing to make this a marketplace. You're still choosing to do X, Y, and Z. And so he's coming in and he's saying, I'm not going to let you do this anymore. And so that's why he shows that anger, and that's why he releases that anger upon the temple. In James chapter 1, if I can get to it. All right, there we go. In James chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, I can't read from a distance anymore. It says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. And so he's even pointing out, and James here in this letter, he's pointing out, hey, like, we're going to be angry. We're going to have emotions. We're going to feel this. We're going to do this. This is going to happen, right? And he's saying, be slow to anger, which is basically saying, hey, don't let anger control you. Don't let anger take control of your life. He's basically saying, oh, they broke something? All right, that's cool. And then slow down and then make them clean it up. Do whatever you got to do. Send them on their way. But he's saying be slow to anger. He's also saying be slow to speak. And before that, he even says be quick to listen. And a lot of people don't get this. Those three things, I'll go in order every time. Whenever you read, that's my hearing. That's my headphone, dude. I don't know what that word is anymore. But he's literally saying, be slow to anger, be slow to speak, and listen. So he's literally saying, if something pops up, and all of a sudden, like you know you're about to get angry, be quick to listen. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to their justification. Be slow to speak. Let them get everything out. Let them talk to you. Let them confess what they did. And then be slow to anger. Meaning, no matter what you heard, no matter what they're telling you, no matter what you're seeing, don't judge too quickly. Right? There's my really good friend of mine that's a few years older than me. He said a story that goes very something like this. He goes, yeah, there was one time when like when we were younger and like we would bake, right? And so like there was a family that was baking, and it was the wife, the daughter, and the son, and they were all baking like a cake. And it was the father's birthday. And so they're baking this cake, and this cake is going really well. But let's be honest, they're having a crap load of fun, and they're making a giant mess, and they're going around and they're throwing flour at each other, and they're throwing, and they put like icing all over the walls and all over the countertop, and all this is happening, And then almost towards the end of the process of making the cake, so it's still a giant mess. They haven't even started. They haven't put it in the oven. They haven't done really much of anything yet. And all of a sudden, the father comes, and he comes in, and he goes, and the first reaction is, "What a mess!" Right? But he says it with such anger, and he says it with such frustration, and he says, "Why? Why did you do this? Why did you wreck my kitchen?" And so when he says that, he gives it about 7 seconds, and he says, "Go to your room," and they go to their room, and he's saying all this with an aggressive tone. He's saying all this with such rage and such frustration and such anger. And so keep in mind, he wasn't quick to listen, he wasn't slow to speak, and he wasn't slow to anger. And so he let anger drive what was happening. And so finally, um, the his wife, the kid's mother's, um, finally he's a little bit more calm, and he turns to the wife and he goes, "Why would you let them ruin the kitchen?" And the wife goes, "We were trying to bake a cake for your birthday, and we were having fun." And all of a sudden, the husband goes, "Oh shoot! Now I'm stuck with. I unreleased my rage. I unreleased my anger. I was so quick to speak and so quick to judge the situation that I wasn't able to understand that you were making me a birthday present." So that's why Jane. That's just a normal representation of a modern day situation where you want to be quick to listen, you want to be slow to speak, and slow to anger. Because what ends up happening is there's another situation where he could have come home and his immediate reaction is, "Whoa, why is my kitchen a mess?" And then he just stays calm, he just stays cool, collected, looking around for someone to speak, and then they finally sort of explain, and then, oh look, he's gonna want to join in on the fun. He's gonna want to join in on what they're doing and have fun with them, right? And so, Jesus and God, they say be angry, and and they say be emotional, but most importantly, they say don't let it control you. Experience those moments when you're supposed to experience those moments. Experience those emotions when you're supposed to experience those emotions. But be slow to understand, be quick to listen, be slow to speak, and be slow to experience the emotion. Because if you are willing to take a step back, and you're willing to take a breath, and you're willing to listen to what's going on instead of being quick to judge, you get to experience the emotion that you're supposed to experience. Because that's most likely what ends up happening is if you're quick to anger, most likely you're not supposed to experience anger in that situation, right? And so it's just something where you want to be very cautious and you want to be very weary that the emotion and the anger is not controlling you, but you're controlling it. But yeah, in Matthew 5, uh, in Matthew 5, 21 through 26. Let me flip to it. Matthew 5, 21 through 26. It says, "You have heard that our ancestors were told, 'You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment.' But I say," and this is Jesus talking, this whole thing, because this is the Sermon on the Mount, And he goes, but I say, if you are even angry at someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So, if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you are on the way to the court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge. Who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. And so Jesus is teaching this on the Sermon on the Mount. And basically, on the Sermon on the Mount is pretty much him giving lessons. There's several, from sin to lust to adultery to anger to praying and fasting to the fruit that we can bear to serving to the law to everything that sort of is happening. But most importantly, it's very distinctive to learn and to recognize that he's simply saying pure rage and rage controlling you, your actions, and your speech and your words and what you do, and who you forgive and who you're willing to forgive is going to inevitably lead you to sin. And Jesus even says it is a sin within itself. And so he's saying, don't let anger control you. He's saying, don't let it be the center of your life. Don't let it be something that is so controlling, something that is so gripped on your life and what controls you and your actions and your words and what's going on around you. Don't let it control those things. Rather, let it control. Not let it control. Don't let it control. Rather, let God control you. You control them. That's pretty much just sort of the overview. And then, so, the moral, I think overall, it's just the understanding of knowing that God gets angry all the time. I mean, he flooded the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, yes, he gets angry. But I think it's a difference between knowing that there's a such thing as holy anger and unjust human anger. And so, I mean, it's up to us, it's up to you, and it's up to me to be able to discern the difference between those two things. But ultimately, like, it's more so about controlling your anger, but also mainly controlling your emotions and controlling what's happening, an overview and oversight of the emotions and oversight of the anger. But yeah, that's it for this episode. I can't really tell, but I'm pretty sure it's running a little short. Pretty much it's just an episode that's been on my heart for a little bit of time, and yeah. So we'll see you guys wait, we will. There's no we. Well, actually, maybe. I don't know. There might be another episode after this with a special appearance from one of my buds. But yeah. So thank you for joining us. and I hope that you keep diving into the Word, and I pray that you keep going to God and keep changing your heart and keep looking more like Christ out there. Um, yeah, hope I pray that this lesson sort of just not this lesson, but like just the overview of the passages in anger that you can go back and you can reflect on and you can listen to and you can read and you could sort of get the overview of what God and Jesus say about anger. So in that case, see